Well, welcome back to a special edition of the Jet Take
Breaking
podcast.
news.
Yeah, breaking news, and one that was really not expected at all. The New York Jets have, out of nowhere, fired Mike Maccagnan, their general manager, and their VP or I think it was player personnel, Brian Hermedinger, his right-hand man, out of absolutely nowhere. It appears that Adam Gase has made a complete power move, a power play, and is trying to get his own guys in the front office and has booted Mike out of the seat of GM after the Jets allowed him to spend $150 million and have a whole draft 2 weeks ago. So Kyle, your initial reaction to this? Obviously, Jets Twitter is on fire right now, but your thoughts on the move? Is the benefit going to be worth the circus that we're about to have to endure for the next few days?
Well, I don't know. That's really circumstantial. My initial reaction was something along the lines of, and I think we've kind of thrown the swearing thing out the window on this show, but holy shit, what the fuck's going on? What the fuck? Because that was the first thing that I woke up to this morning. I literally woke up, checked my phone, and I just had about 30 notifications from, ESPN, The Score, Twitter, people DMing me, people texting me, what the fuck is going on? And I'm trying to go for a ball. And I just see Maccagnan. I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah, on the West Coast here, Kyle has become my Adam Schefter because every time I get a FaceTime from Kyle Fahey, I'm waking up to it, and it's, the Jets have done something. I mean, it was the same case when the Jets traded up for Sam Darnold, when we traded Sheldon Richardson. I mean, there was a bunch of them. Le'Veon Bell. All of them, it's Kyle waking me up with a FaceTime call. And I woke up again, and I was trying to decline it to see, okay, what do we do? And I was like, maybe they made a trade for Jalen Ramsey. Maybe they traded Darren Lee, something. But I knew Kyle was going to be like, we have to do an emergency podcast. And then I see Mike Maccagnan fired. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little shocked. I will admit that Kyle and I both had heard some as most people did, but we did get some confirmation on those reports.
Everybody heard this.
Yes, but we did get some extra confirmation that those reports that came out were true, and despite that there were people who came out to those that they were completely false, that the reports of a rift between Gase and Mac were true, and that Gase was making a power play, and that they could be heading for a split. But it's still surprising nonetheless because, look, I mean, in some regard, I commend Chris Johnson for just making the decision that he believed to be right, knowing the backlash that he's going to face for the next few days and a few weeks. I mean, this is a decision that screams ineptitude and circus on the surface. People are going to look at this and be like, wait, this is the guy that you just let draft your franchise quarterback a year ago. You just let him drop basically all your salary cap on Le'Veon Bell, on C.J. Mosley, Jamison Crowder, all these free agents, and then you just gave him a full draft, and now you're going to fire him and most likely his scouting department 3 weeks later. However, I will say, and Kyle, I was saying this to you before the show started, it's not like Maccagnan shit the bed this offseason. He had a fairly good offseason,
This was a very good offseason. Yeah.
There were some things he didn't address that I would have liked maybe in corner and center, but he had a fairly good offseason. However, it was a relatively safe offseason. He took a guy like Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams is going to be good regardless of who the GM is. He brought in guys like Le'Veon Bell and C.J. Mosley. He brought in good players. So it's not like we let him handle the whole offseason, the most important offseason in Jets history as we were calling it heading into it, and he messed it all up, and now we're firing him in retrospect. He did a fairly good job. It sounds like this move was probably one of two things, or both. One, the power play of Gase, the rift between them, Gase thinking he's not going to be able to work with him. But two, I think that most people, including the fans, most reasonable fans have realized that Maccagnan will never be an elite GM in this league. And Kyle, we talked about this a year ago. I mean, did we really expect that Mike Maccagnan was the guy? We had this whole debate. I believe it was after the Jets beat the Lions week 1 when there was all that hype, and we talked about, well, do we still believe that Mike Maccagnan is the guy the GM that's going to lead the Jets to a Super Bowl in the Promised Land? I don't think you can be that inefficient at drafting and do that. Yes, he's had some solid picks. He's obviously brought in Sam Darnold, Jamal Adams. He's hit on his first-round picks, which is huge. But hitting on day 2 and day 3 guys when the majority of the league comes from those guys, and Mac's inability to do that certainly hurt him, and some poor free agency moves and whatnot. So I think most people recognize that, one, he's not an elite GM, and two, he had an okay offseason, which means if the Jets were making this decision for the best long-term view, as Chris Johnson said, and believe that Adam Gase's guy and Joe Douglas for the Eagles, and potentially there's rumblings that they could bring in Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network as a top personnel guy as well. That's a great front office, and you're bringing them into an already pretty solid situation that Mac created. I'm not hating it. I do think there's a chance that this works out for the Jets. I think they're going to have to deal with some short-term dread and short-term media dragging, circus, clown show. We thought the Giants were the circus in New York. Maybe not. They're going to have to deal with that for the next few days and for the next few weeks and maybe for the next few months. But in the long term, I think when the season starts and when you see the roster that Mac did put together is playing solid, and then you get, and I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch because we don't necessarily know who the GM is going to be, but it sounds like it's going to be Douglas and potentially with Jeremiah with him. Then you give them an offseason, and if they're already better than Mac, then you made the right decision. So that's kind of my whole thoughts on it. Kyle, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll hate Adam Gase, right? Like, everybody knows I'm not a fan of him. I don't think he's as great as a football mind as people would like to say. He drives talented players away. He has complete misusage of an offense. He didn't do jack shit in Miami besides a wild card playoff berth. He did.
Very fair, but we'll come back to it.
He did exactly what Dolphins fans told us what he was going to do. He took complete control of the organization within, what, 2 months?
3 months.
3 months.
Clearly,
that's how long it took him.
Yeah, as Joe Caparosa says, he's clearly got a little bit of little finger in him. I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones at all, but he clearly...
No. He just Thanos'd the fucking team. All right? He told us, he called his shot, he called this shit, and then he did it. And now we're all surprised. And we're going to act like Adam Gase, who has struggled as a coach, as a leader, as a winner, is capable enough to come into this team and take control. It's not okay. This is on the ownership. Chris Johnson, what the fuck? You just got played, dude. And now you can't get rid of Adam Gase. Because what you've done, this was a 1-year free trial with Adam Gase, in my mind. You either make the playoffs or you don't. We move on. Right? That's a standard for at least me this year.
Don't agree.
But now you're stuck with Adam Gase. Because now you have a front office that he recruits. When the fuck does a head coach recruit a front office?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest issue with this, and I'll come back to Adam Gase because I think I'm a bigger fan of Adam Gase than you are. I've clearly rationalized it to myself over the past few months, but yeah, that's clearly the biggest issue is that part of the Jets' ineptitude for the past since Rex and Idzik since they've been a terrible team really has been they're both reporting to the owner. Or when we kept Rex and fired Tannenbaum and then brought in the GM there. That's exactly what we're doing again, is we're keeping the head coach and firing the GM. However, I will say, if you're bringing in quality guys that clearly want to work with Gase, it could be different. I understand what you're saying. And circling back to Adam Gase, and you clearly are not a fan of him, yeah, I don't love him as a GM. And to see the reports that says, he disagreed on Le'Veon Bell and what we paid him, that's concerning because that's the best move of the offseason in my mind, is one, they got a top, I understand the whole, you don't want to pay running backs, but when you looked at the situation, and we talked about this ad nauseum this season, about why it's important to surround Sam Darnold with a talent like that when you have all the cap space in the world, and not to mention, it's not like the Jets paid him, an exorbitant amount. He got him on a good deal. People were saying that the Jets are going to have to pay him, $16, $17 million a year. We got him for a good deal. C.J. Mosley's maybe a little different of case, but I still love the signing, and I think he's going to be great for the locker room. But yeah, I don't love Adam Gase as a GM. I've come around him on the X and O's. I watch friend of the podcast Joe Blewett's film review on his offense. I clearly recognize the lack of quarterback talent and quarterback health that he had in his time in Miami. And the one season that he did have a healthy quarterback and a quarterback that was playing solid, he did go to the playoffs. And then when I hear, Kelechi Osemele talk about how he's a dog, how, the players respect him and how they're really grinding for him so far and the offseason, I've come around on Adam Gase as a coach, and I could see him being successful because I do think he is a very bright X's and O's mind, and I think his experience in Miami is going to help him. However, I do not think he's a good GM. So that's the issue, is that if the Jets bring in a guy like Douglas or bring in Jeremiah, if they fix the power structure and say, look, Adam Gase, I understand that you want your guys, but Joe Douglas is now your boss, or at least you're reporting to him, or at least, at the very minimum, he's making all the personnel decisions, then I'm fine with it. But if it starts to become what, the Raiders have in Oakland, where, John Gruden's really the GM, and then Mike Mayock is kind of his advisor. If that's what's happening, then I'm not a fan of this at all, because I do not believe in Adam Gase as a GM. And I think we saw that evident in Miami. So that's the most concerning part about it. But I have come around on Adam Gase as a head coach. The other concerning part about this, though, outside of the media frenzy that's been hitting and will continue to hit the Jets for the next few days, outside of that, outside of the concerned power structure, it's also the trust in the locker room. I mean, it's also, how does this affect the team? Because, look, this is a guy that stood up at a press conference, 6 days ago? Not even? And said, maybe it was a week ago, and said, look.
A week ago.
Thanks, Kyle. The reports are, of a rift between me and Mike are completely false, and it pisses me off. And he really got up there and vehemently denied it.
He lied. He fucking lied to everybody.
He bold-faced lied. And it's one thing to do it to the media, but it does raise a question of, is he doing that to his players? Is he going to look his players in the eye and tell them one thing and do the other thing? Because that's one thing, and again, to bring up, I listened to Kelechi Osemele on Adam Lefkoe's podcast, and he talked about his experience in Oakland last year, and part of the reason it was so toxic there was because Gruden was telling players one thing and doing the other. And he talked about how he was, I will say, he did talk about he was really excited how New York is looking and how the locker room and the training, it looks like, when he was in Baltimore when they won a Super Bowl. So that's good. But you have to worry about, are players going to be sitting there and say, this guy can't be trusted, this guy doesn't have any integrity? Do players look at it and say, the guy, especially the draft picks, this guy just drafted me and then we just fired him 3 weeks later? There are some concerns about how does this affect the team? How does the team go from, I don't know. I personally believe in the long view that there's a very solid chance that this works out, because it comes back to, and I'll ask you this, Kyle, did you believe in Mike Maccagnan as a GM? Did you believe that Mike Maccagnan was the guy that was going to win the Jets a Super Bowl, that could build a perennial contender roster?
No,
exactly.
and you have to get rid of him, right? But we're climbing, this all goes back to ownership, and immediately what I thought of when I, realized, the timing of this, when that kind of, what the fuck moment passed me by a little bit, we, as an organization, have zero class in terms of how you treat people. We let Nick Mangold, Eric Decker, and David Harris go after almost an entire training camp, of where fans knew they were going to be let go, and we were just waiting. They were just waiting. And I thought that was completely unfair to those guys, and we just cut them. We said, all right, fuck you.
Mangold went through a training camp?
It was David Harris, Eric Decker, and Nick Mangold, I believe.
I remember David Harris. I remember him going through a training camp, I believe. Was Eric Decker there?
Yep.
Yeah,
Eric Decker was definitely there.
I don't think I think you're wrong in Nick.
Nick Mangold may have retired.
I think he retired. I don't think he.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think he retired after 2016.
Okay, but David Harris and Eric Decker still treated poorly, let go, they let them go through an entire offseason of workouts when they could have went to another team, right? Or at least given them the opportunity. Do I think it would have necessarily worked out for them? Probably not, because they were both basically done with their careers, but still, horseshit as an organization. Unfair to those players. And, I like Mike Maccagnan. He obviously has some flaws as a general manager. I thought he was always a guy that was fairly truthful, was fairly, transparent. I mean, likable, yeah. You never knew what the Jets were going to do. All these trades, everything going on, the only guy that would ever break the news was Manish. And that's it. Sam Darnold trade, nobody really heard about it. Le'Veon Bell, for that whole night, Jets fans were like, oh, we're not getting Le'Veon. He's going somewhere else. We had no fucking idea. You like that in a GM. And he couldn't draft for shit, basically, was what it comes down to. Outside of the first round, right, and maybe the third round, which is kind of polite.
I will add, though, that people are always defending him for his first-round picks, but it's a lot easier to hit on your first-round picks when you're picking at the top of the round every time. When you're getting,
right.
You know what I mean? And the one time he didn't was 2016, and it was probably his, friend of the podcast, probably his worst first-round pick in Darren Lee. Not the crap on Darren here, but out of the ones that he's taken between Jamal and Sam and it's a lot easier to hit when you're picking top 6 every time because you're guaranteed to pretty much get a top 10 talent every time.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue... I didn't know you. Keep going.
Okay, so after the drafting, which is a problem, you look at free agency, and there's been some major wins in terms of free agency and under-the-radar trades, value. He's pretty good at it. Obviously, some contracts fans don't like. I will still argue that the Ryan Fitzpatrick thing was literally the only thing you could have done in that situation. But you'd probably give it like a B, his free agency, right? And then you give his drafting. You give his drafting probably a D overall. It's been pretty bad. And that's a GM.
You're saying overall. You're not just saying this offseason.
Right.
Yeah, I'd probably go drafting C just because overall, like if you're just excluding the first round, then I think it's like a D-. But then when you do have to factor in that, look, he did deliver. I mean, I don't want to again count chickens before they hatch, but he did deliver a franchise quarterback in Sam Darnold. He did deliver Jamal Adams. Again, he was picking at the top of the round. But when you do factor in the way the roster looks now compared to when he took over, I think I would give him a C or a C+ because he did capitalize on the picks at the top of the round. But yeah, free agency overall, I'd probably say like a B. B-.
Yeah. So that's a GM who has to go, right? I think we all agree with that.
GM that's heading for purgatory or wild card exits.
Sure. It makes sense that the GM has to go, but the way you do it, how it was executed. This is almost like straight out of a history textbook where, hey, the leader we got, kind of like iffy, not doing too hot. Oh, this little young guy, he's done it before. He kind of knows how to lead. He wasn't also great at it, but he's a new face. And oh shit, he just established martial law. That's kind of what Adam Gase just did. I don't know. I feel like the Jets are getting played.
Yeah, I mean, like I could see that. I could see that Christopher Johnson might be getting played a little bit by Adam Gase, that he gives Adam Gase the job, and then Adam Gase is giving him essentially an ultimatum, basically saying that I'm not going to work with Maccagnan, and you can't fire Adam Gase. I mean, you just hired him, and you just brought him in to work with Sam Darnold. He's already been with the team. Who else are you going to hire? You can't hire Adam. You can't fire him. So I am a little concerned if that is the main impetus for what happened. The biggest concern is really just it looks like a complete lack of a plan when you really should have just fired him and cleaned house in January. But all those reports that came out said, no, Mike Maccagnan is safe. So that makes, part of me wanted to believe that, look, maybe they, understood that the scouts, for a front office, this is really the start of their offseason. This is where the year ends, is right after the draft. Right after they're done signing undrafted free agents, that's the end of their calendar year. And so part of me wanted to believe that, okay, look, they realized that Maccagnan wasn't ever going to be an elite GM. However, they thought he was a solid to good GM and didn't want to fire him and his whole scouts and have to start anew with a few months to go before the draft. And the offseason, they thought maybe it would be difficult to recruit some top free agents without him, without having an established GM. So part of me wanted to believe that they just let him stay. He made some great, relatively safe moves, and then they were going to clean house. But the logical side of me knows that wasn't the case, that they did want to keep him, and then Gase kind of forced his way out, which is concerning. It's just a lack of a plan. I mean, it's like you should have just fired them both in January. However, I'm not going to complain about it because, again, would keeping Maccagnan be the right move? It's a few months too late, granted, but you're still, in my opinion, making a move that's going to better this franchise. You'll deal with the bad media optics and maybe a bad franchise look, and I do worry a little bit about, well, how is the rest of the league going to view this? Is the respect going to go down? Whatever. But I still believe that if you get rid of Mac and you bring in a guy like Joe Douglas, and I guess I'll segue to your thoughts on the guys they could potentially be bringing in, I still think that there's a chance that the Jets are going to be a better team and a better run organization because of this. And I think there's a very good chance that we're going to be looking back, a year from now or 2 years from now and say, you know what, that was a really tough decision that Christopher Johnson made, but I really commend him for recognizing the mistake he made, or at least for by keeping Mac, or for doing it in the face of all the media criticism that he's going to face. But Kyle, obviously the name that is being reported multiple times is Joe Douglas, Howie Roseman's right-hand man in Philadelphia, has ties to Adam Gase. We'll start with him. There's a few other candidates we can talk about, but he sounds like the favorite to be the future GM of the New York Jets. Your thoughts on him in the quick research that you did before this emergency podcast, and I guess before on him potentially becoming a GM.
So basically, Joe Douglas, everybody on their knees, giving this guy head for the things he's done for the Eagles, and he was a scout for the Ravens for 15 years. I believe the connection to Adam Gase is 1 year in Chicago. I'm going to guess 2014, something around there. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. I don't know if you can Google that for me, Ben. But credited a lot with the Eagles' Super Bowl win. I mean, they've just done nothing but praise him. And I look at their drafts, and he's the head of player development or player personnel, right? So drafting is a big part of his thing. I think one of the biggest quotes from the GM that I read in an article was that he has complete control over the board on how they list the players, that they trust him. So he makes that board for them, that's pretty big when a GM lets you do that. So obviously they must like you. And if you look at the Eagles draft the last couple of years, I'm going to start in 2017. We should probably figure out exactly when his tenure with the Eagles started.
I think it was 2017.
It's 2017?
Well, he's been there for 3 years, so it could be 2016, 2017, 2018, right? I know he's been there for 3 years. Hold on. Yeah, 2016.
He was hired on May 11th.
So, yeah, before the 2016 season.
Okay. So his first draft was 2017.
Yep.
Derek Barnett, who, I don't know.
He's a pretty good player.
He has like 7.5 career sacks, I think, off the top of my head.
You just knew he had 7.5 career sacks off the top of your head?
I think I recently saw like a stat on him.
I mean, hold on. What pick was he taking? 14th overall?
14th. Yeah. In 2 years, he has 7.5 sacks and 8 tackles. No, I'm sorry. That's assisted tackles. 37 combined tackles. Not ideal. He only played 6 games this past year, though.
Yeah, I think he's been hurt. I think that's the big thing.
And then Sidney Jones,
and
he's
also been behind a lot of guys, too.
That defensive line is pretty good for the Eagles. It is hard to rotate in and out of there. You do have to include that in there. Good point, Ben.
He tore his rotator cuff last season, so.
Hard to do a swim move of a torn rotator cuff. That is confirmed. Sidney Jones, who I loved, tore his ACL at the Pro Day.
He hasn't really even gotten a shot yet, because I think he's been hurt the past 2 years.
I think he started playing like later this year.
Yeah, he did.
I'm just trying to find anything on him. He really hasn't done anything either, but that's because of injury. Both of them, talent-wise, though, were definitely first-round picks. I was in love with Sidney Jones. He was my number 1 rated corner in a very long time. And then from there, Rasul Douglas, I know he played a pretty big role with the Eagles in the Super Bowl. He is definitely a part of their secondary. And then from there, Mac Hollins, that's a good mid-round find. I know he did some nice things for them. Donnell Humphrey, they really don't take running back seriously in the offense. Kind of like an Adam Gase type of thing. Just a rotation, but I know Humphrey did do some things returning in as a running back, and I was a fan of him personally. Shelton Gibson, I don't know the name. Nathan Geary, I don't know the name. And Elijah Quails, I don't know the name, so I can't give you an opinion on them. And then 2018, they won 2017, right?
Yeah, they won.
Yeah.
They won 2017, and then 2018 they didn't. I don't think they had a first-round pick. Or
they didn't have a first-round pick. They probably
Goddard in the second. I know that.
Who is?
And he had a pretty good season. He was a rookie at 33 catches and 4 TDs.
And not bad.
Yeah, as a rookie, I mean that was pretty much what Herndon did. He's a problem
And
for them. And he's their tight end too next to Ertz. So.
And they had Nick Foles, who obviously a healthy Carson Wentz is better than Nick Foles.
And the other guy in the I'm reading up on it. I don't just know the Eagles 2018 draft at the top of my head, but their 4th round pick, Avonte Maddox, played a lot at corner and safety, and this says he looks like potentially another steal. He played pretty well. And I mean that's the big thing is you're reading, okay, how did he do on day 2 and day 3? Because day 1 wasn't the issue for the Jets. I mean, still you don't want to take that for granted. You still obviously want your first round picks to hit. But look, and you don't obviously know how much of this is Howie Roseman or how much of this is Joe Douglas. But the thing is that it looks like Joe Douglas is a respected name in league circles, and that he's an up and coming GM or potential GM. The other guy that's been listed with him is Daniel Jeremiah, who is obviously the top NFL Network analyst, took over for Mike Mayock this year, and is a friend of Joe Douglas. And if he comes into the front office as well, that'll be interesting because I think he does a good job on NFL Network, and I think you could potentially be building a much better and a much more I'm trying to think of the word. I guess intelligent or forward-thinking front office than the Jets have had. It seems like the Jets have kind of had just an archaic, often wrong front office. And I think if you bring in a guy like Douglas and a guy like Jeremiah, you could be building a potentially strong foundation for a front office. The concern still lies with how much power does Gase have in personnel decisions. But if it comes down to this is Joe Douglas's 53 and Daniel Jeremiah, is drafting whatever, then I'm a lot happier. If it's Adam Gase is handling mainly the X's and O's, minus a few inputs here and there on what players he likes, then I think this is a good move. Your thoughts on Daniel Jeremiah? I think the other, I don't want to mess his name up either. The other name was brought up he's from the Bears. What was his name? It was like Champ Kelly. Champ Kelly from the Bears, who's their director of pro scouting. He was brought up. The Jets do need to fulfill the Rooney Rule, so they will interview a minority candidate. I would hope they look at Louis Riddick, who I think.
Bro, did you see our mentions in that? Some dude was like, "Stop bringing up the Rooney Rule," and then some dude commented on that, it's like, "Just say that you hate black people." I was like, "Whoa,
did you see
calm down, Twitter."
Then he said, "Lamo, my kids are half. Get the fuck out." So I don't know. Our Twitter's wilding out right now. Yeah, he called me he was like, "Stop trying to be a hero." I was like, "I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm acknowledging a rule that Jets need to follow." I'm acknowledging a rule that Jets need to follow and a great candidate who fulfills that rule. I'm not. I don't know. Twitter's a wild place. But Champ Kelly, director of player personnel. I don't know too much about him, but obviously he's with the Chicago Bears, who have certainly been on the up and up the past year or two. I guess it's
wait. Daniel Jeremiah was a scout for the Ravens, right? That's his big thing?
So. I think that's how they overlap.
So that's the connection? Yeah.
I believe so. The interesting thing about Daniel Jeremiah is we can go and literally look at his big boards and it's the same thing with Mayock, but including this year, we can literally look at his player rankings for this year and his thoughts on who the Jets drafted this year. And in years past, I was reading about it. I went to his 2018 big board to see, okay, how much on these has he hit? And I will say he had Sam Darnold as his top-rated quarterback, so that's a promising sign. All right, I think this is probably where we can wrap it up for now. It does seem like the Jets will probably make a decision on their GM in the next few days. Maybe it takes a little longer, but longer that Adam Gase...
this is done today.
You think it's going to be done today?
I don't think Chris Johnson can actually go up there, him or Adam Gase, can go up there in front of the media and take the whole, okay, you lied to us, you lied to your fans, blah, 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 without having somebody to sit next to him and be like, well, yeah, you may have lied to you, but I'm the better option. You have to present something new. There's no way you could sit in front of the media. You will get demolished if you do that.
I agree, but I don't think there is no media obligation. I don't believe.
Oh, no, there's going to have to be an announcement.
No, I know, but is there... Well, I understand there's going to be a press conference when they hire the GM, but unless Gase has... You might have a weekly press conference, which will be interesting. Yeah, I could see it getting done in the next few days, but I could also see it taking a few weeks if the whole Douglas-Jeremiah thing doesn't work out. But it sounds like from what Schefter and Rappaport were reporting that this has been expected for the last few weeks, that this has been talked about in league circles, that this is this is going to happen. That there's been rumblings about how Jeremiah and Joe Douglas could team up. If that's the case, then yeah, I agree that this could be a done deal in the next few days. That this could be a done deal in the next 72 hours. But I could also see it taking a few weeks, going through a search process, because again, they do have to fulfill the Rooney Rule. I don't think they should just rush into hiring Joe Douglas and hiring Adam Gase as guy. I think they should look at all their candidates. So we'll see. That'll do it for us. We should be back relatively shortly. Trying to get maybe a special guest on the line to break down this whole situation. But you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter. That's the best place to follow us. That Twitter, regardless of our inconsistencies on uploading, Twitter's always been pretty consistent. So if you want just consistent Jets news, thoughts, jokes, whatever, you can follow us at the Jet Take. If you'd like to listen to the podcast when we are uploading, just search the Jet Take wherever you listen to podcasts: iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher. So yeah, that'll do it for us. Again, a crazy day to be a Jets fan. One that's going to be painful for the next few days in dealing with the media jokes. But again, as I said, I think there's a solid chance that this works out, and I do amend Chris Johnson for potentially having the long-term view of realizing that Mac is not going to be an elite GM. I'm worried a little bit about Littlefinger as our head coach, but we'll see. Regardless, thank you for listening. We'll be back relatively shortly. Everybody have a safe week, and let's hope the Jets do not mess up this GM choice.